Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm gonna be setting up my journal for September, which is actually my birthday month, and I really love fall in general, so I'm really excited for this one. But before we get started, I'm just gonna be flipping through my pages from August. I did a super simple theme for August and I really loved it, but this time I'm gonna be doing a bit of a more drawing heavy theme, which I haven't done in a while, but I just felt like doing a super cozy Studio Ghibli theme, or to be specific, a My Neighbor Totoro theme, which is one of my favorite movies. So I picked out some muted colors. I wanted to get pretty close to the movie, but I mainly used this muted blue and a light beige, but also a orange shade and a green. And as always, all of the products that I'm going to be using are listed in the description in case you're curious. So starting off with the first page, as always, I'm making my usual calendar, which doesn't really have any function, but I just like to have it as an overview and also to fill out the page a bit. I wrote down the weekdays on the top with the orange marker, which I mainly wanted to use for the titles because it's kind of a nice contrast to the blue shade. And then each day is 2 spaces wide, and then I'm writing the dates in black into one of the rows and leaving another one empty in between the weeks. I also crossed out the empty days from August and October with a green marker, and then I'm using the blue to add some lines in between the weeks. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Studio Ghibli, it's a Japanese animation studio that makes incredibly beautiful movies like Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, and a lot more that you might have heard of. And these 2 little characters that I'm drawing from a cover page are from the movie My Neighbor Totoro, and they're actually just 2 small side characters, and they're basically much smaller versions of Totoro himself. But I just always love the scene where Mei finds them in their garden and starts following them around. I think it's just super cute. So I just took a reference from the movie and I slightly altered it, so it's the 2 small Totoros walking on some grass and holding a little flower each because I wanted to add a bit more color to the setup. Now, I know a lot of you probably don't have a lot of time to spend on your bullet journal, so just in case you don't feel like drawing, you could just print out some pictures from Pinterest to include in your spread, or you can also download my PDF in the description of this video, where I scanned all of the small doodles from the setup, so you can just print those out as well and use them in your own journal. Anyway, I first made the outlines using a Pigma Micron Fineliner, but you can obviously also use a different brand. Just make sure they don't smudge if you color on top of them. Then I colored in the 2 characters, the bigger one with the blue marker and then the smaller one with the beige. And I tried to make sure that I always color in the same sort of direction and correct any sort of streaks that happen. But of course you could also use something like colored pencils or even watercolor if that's something you enjoy using in your own journal. Anyway, then I also colored in the stems and the leaves for the 2 flowers and also the petals with the orange shade. And here I'm just adding some grass underneath them to make sure they look like they're actually walking on some grass. And I just varied the length of the individual blades. And then I also went over it with the black fineliner again to add some more definition. Underneath I wrote the title with the orange marker and I used the thicker side to make it nice and bold. And then I also added the color palette on the top where there was some empty space so that it ties everything together nicely. And that is it for these first 2 pages, so let's move on to my habit trackers. For my habit trackers, I first wrote the title on the top with the same orange marker and I tried to place it in the middle, but as you can see that didn't quite work out. But I just added some green lines on the side to kind of balance it out a bit. And then for my daily habits, I wanted to sort of switch things up a bit. So instead of individual trackers, I wanted to make a sort of calendar where I can track all of the habits in one place. And I got some inspiration from Ivana Journals on Instagram, so I'll link her post down below in the description. First, I made all of the outlines with the blue marker, and each day is 3 by 3 spaces tall, and then I left some space underneath the title because I wanted to add some doodles in the empty spaces later on. Then I also colored in the first line of each day with the same marker for the dates, and then I wrote them on top in black. Next, I added the color palette again in the left corner on the top, and then I also included the smallest Totoro again, sort of marching towards the right and carrying a small leaf, which I thought looked really cute. I used the same method as for the cover page, so I first made the outlines using the Pigma Micron Fineliner, and then I went in with the green marker to make the grass and also color in the little leaf, and then I used the beige again to color in the little Totoro. This way I can make sure that I don't smudge anything, and I also know where to place the marker, since the Pigma Microns are actually alcohol based and so they're waterproof. So just make sure that yours don't smudge before you go in with a marker on top. Underneath the calendar, I wanted to add another small tutorial holding a little flower, but this time facing towards the front to switch things up a little bit. And then I also wanted to add a little key for which habits I will be tracking this month. Basically, I will assign each habit one of the colors, and then I can fill out each day with the colors of the habits I ended up doing. So I'm just gonna draw a little circle whenever I complete a habit. And then at the end of the month, I have a nice overview of which ones I did and which ones I should be working on a bit more. So here I just finished coloring in the little tutorial, and then next to it I wrote down my habits. So this month I'm going to be tracking not using any social media in the morning, doing some sort of movement, doing a little bit of art practice, and not using my phone before I go to bed. Underneath, I'm also going to be adding my usual weekly habits. So first I made the same style of title, and again I didn't really manage to write it completely centered, but I guess it's not too noticeable. And then I wrote down my 4 weekly habits in black, but later on I ended up coloring in the background with the beige. So if you're recreating the setup, I would recommend adding the color first, or again using a fineliner that doesn't smudge. As always, I'm tracking making my weekly spreads, having a little self-care day, doing my weekly reset, and working out 1 or 2 times per week. To track them, I added 4 circles, 1 for each week on the right with a blue marker, and then I can fill them out whenever I complete one, or cross it out if I don't. The other page will, as always, be dedicated to planning out my tasks and events for this month. So I first wrote down monthly planning on the top in the same sort of style, and then I made 6 sections in total, 4 for each of the weeks, and then 2 more for events in September and October. I first colored in the background for the titles with the beige, and then the first 4 sections are 11 spaces tall, and all of them are 11 spaces wide with 2 spaces empty in between them horizontally and 1 space vertically, but as always it depends on how many dot grid spaces your journal has, and for reference mine has 26 spaces horizontally and 38 spaces vertically. For the borders, I used the green shade, the blue, and the orange, and I alternated between the colors for a bit more variation. And I also left 1 space empty underneath the titles as always, just to add a little bit more white space. Then I wrote the titles in black into the middle of the sections, so I just wrote week 1 through 4 on the top, and then just September and October for the bottom 2 sections. And that is it for these 2 pages, so let's move on to my first weekly spread of September. As always, I wanted to keep this spread super simple, so I went for a layout with 8 equal sections, and each section is 11 spaces wide and 17 spaces tall, with 2 spaces empty in between the sections both vertically and horizontally. In the first section, I made a mini calendar, and I first used the blue as a background for the weekdays on the top, and then I wrote the dates underneath in black and crossed out the empty days with the orange marker. Then I added another doodle of the smallest tutorial underneath. I think the other tutorial would have had a bit too much detail for the size, so that's why I chose the smallest one, and I think it just looks really cute and adds a bit more detail to the spread. If you've watched some of the Studio Ghibli movies before, let me know which one is your favorite down below. I'm really curious, and I definitely have not seen all of the movies yet, so I would be curious to hear about your recommendations. Then I also added a border with the blue marker all around this section to give it a bit more structure. Then for my daily sections, I first used the beige again as a background for the weekdays on the top, and then I made the borders alternating between the orange, green, and blue shade again, because I just love including all of the colors from this palette. Now, if you're looking for some inspiration for your weekly spreads, I do post them every week in the community tab of my channel. I do try to post them on time, but they might be a bit late every now and then if I forget to make them. Then for the daily sections, I wrote the weekdays on the top in black, and I actually wrote the whole words this time, which is kind of unusual for me. I usually just write down the first few letters, but I wanted to add the dates on the bottom, so I had enough space to actually write them out. Next, I used the beige again as a background for the dates as well in the bottom right of each section, and then I wrote them on black again. And that is it for the setup, so let's do a little flip through. Now, originally I was planning a bit of a different theme for this month, but I was just really in the mood for some cozy, almost like fall vibes, and so Studio Ghibli just really hits the spot for me, and I really had a lot of fun creating this theme, so I hope you like it as well. I know the doodles are a bit more work this time, which is why I didn't include that many, but I still really enjoyed drawing the little tutorials, and I think the color palette also turned out really cute. Anyway, let me know which page was your favorite from the setup, and don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy my content and would like to see more of it in the future. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I hope I'll see you again next time. Bye!